That's the way I interpret that ordinance.
That's, you're interpreting something that isn't there.
Okay.
If you're adding on to your house or improving it that way is a different story. That was that discussion, George, and trust me,
Well, it never got changed on paper.
whatever. You're misinformed again then.
Oh, Steve.
Well, George, you sit there and tell me that I'm misinformed. I work in every flippin' city in the state of Minnesota. I know what things happen with these things. You drive truck, and I'm not gonna argue about driving truck up and down the road, because that's what you do for a living. I don't.
I didn't say you were misinformed. I mean,
Yes,
like,
you did.
yeah, because.
Obviously, I did, because that's what I was informed at. Now, what she just told me is a complete different thing than what I was informed long before she started working for the city of Isani. Okay, so I'm wrong because I was informed wrong.
You
Somebody's
know
supposed to know what
this.
they're talking about.
I'm just saying, that's what
I'm
you
just
said.
saying, I'm wrong because somebody informed me that's supposed to know what they're talking about, informed me incorrectly. Then don't tell me I'm wrong.
Well, then don't say you did a lot of digging on it if you didn't.
I've done
All right, let's
every
call this
flippin' city.
meeting of the Isani City Council Budget Work Session to order. If we can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Doing a roll call, we are missing Councilman Collison, who's absent tonight, and we will move to adopt the agenda here, if I can get a motion. Any public comment, I guess I should open that up first, but hearing none, I will consider a motion to adopt the agenda.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
I have a motion from Councilman Merrill and a second from Councilman Heeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to business item F1. Mike, if you want to take us from here.
Yeah, we're getting down to kind of this last half hour, so I'll try to kind of go through and sequence our items here, and if you guys want to stop me along the way, or we think there's something more pressing, we want to jump forward or backward, just let me know. All right, so we've got the budget schedule in there. Big thing to know is at the end of this meeting, if we want to have the next work session at the next, what is it, 18th? We just need to state that, right? We've already declared that one. We can have future ones in September, October, whatever, but we got to declare those. We got to post that stuff. At September meeting, we'll, oops, I want to make this go down just a little bit. We'll approve a preliminary budget. Preliminary budget is, as we've found out in the last couple of years, we can tweak that, right? The budget itself can go up, down, change, swap, whatever. The only thing that we are committing to at the September meeting, when we set the preliminary levy is that levy cannot be higher, right? So if we find ourselves, boy, we're really uncertain, you might just decide, oh, we're going to artificially set it here with the full intent of moving it down some amount, but we haven't decided where that is yet. That's a thing that many councils have done over the years, throughout the state. Then it's when we get into December, that's, God, I wish this would move a little bit. Then we get into December, that's when we're going to set that final budget and that final levy. So there we're a little ways off on that.
So I have a quick question,
Yeah.
Mike. Since we're kind of short today, would it be okay? Why is there not any meetings in October and November? Because it always seems like every year when I come to the budget meeting sessions in December before I was on council, it seems like it's like there's still stuff that's being discussed, and then that day the stuff changes. So is there a reason that we don't have October and November as well, or could we do that? Because, I mean, the more we talk about this, the better it's gonna be, I think. So
Yep,
would it be
the-
okay to do one a month, October and November?
Yeah, it's set up the way that it is because that's the way it's been done, and changes to that just have to be at direction of the council.
Okay. Is
So
that
if
some-
you guys want new budget meetings, more.
I mean, I think is it, because I mean, usually it's me at the end trying to bring up something to try to cut the taxes, at least it has been, right? So, so is that normally, and I guess I probably don't, I'm a procrastinator, I guess, is probably why I usually wait till the last meeting, but, and it helps when you have people in the audience here
Right.
at the last meeting that will support that kind of direction. So that's one reason too, that I've always waited till the last meeting to kind of bring up some of those things, and it does change. But I mean, I would say, in general, your goal is to get it finalized to as close as you can in September, and then if you need to adjust it at the end, right? Or is it,
Well, it's up to however the council wants to do it. I mean, I think, in my experience, you generally find things change toward the end. I think that's mostly just because pressure
Builds.
lends itself,
Yeah.
lends itself to people making decisions, right? It's easy to, when you know you've got 6 more months, it's easy to say, well, let's talk about it, let's think about it. But then once you get to that day, it's like, this is it, and so pressure kind of lends itself to people picking a position, so.
I think for me personally, I think it's always helpful to learn more information than have time to digest it. So I mean, I would rather have one in October and November as well. Just
So this was another thing to that, about more information. I kind of present something that I'm trying to make, palatable, right? But a lot of what I'm working in is just really
Not.
kind of not presentation friendly. So if council wants to see the budget book, or the tax rate analysis, right, where I keep the, 20 years of history, plus and minus, that kind of thing. Capital improvement plan especially. Capital improvement plan, I only present 20 years because even that doesn't present well. I run it out farther than that. So if you guys want to see those books, I can send those to you. They're Excel workbooks, if you're even mildly familiar. I know, Jimmy, you've looked at that a little bit in the past, and, I keep a lot of fun notes in there. You can kind of hover over the cell and see, well, this was here, and then now it's changed here, and at this meeting or this resolution, this was approved, you can see kind of some of that fun stuff. And it's really hard when, like on, in my capital plan, just Fund 920, I looked at this as I was putting this together, but just Fund 920, just that one page of that workbook is more than 3,000 cells. Well, now you got, 9 more tabs. It's difficult to say, all right, now I'm putting this into one meeting, or 2, or 3 even, really. I mean, if you don't start to kind of get into it, there's only so much that I can communicate at a meeting, So if that's the kind of stuff you guys want to see, anybody can data request it. We've had, I know a few years back, Clark Johnson asked for those things. I didn't hear anything back, but, he got PDF and Excels, and he was not the first nor the last resident, so.
I think it's good to, for council to kind of bounce the stuff off of each other, so we all come back, like we just had the discussion about the impervious surfaces and parking, and now that gives us time to research stuff and figure out more information. So I think it's good that you can obviously get that information from you, but I think it's better to get it, like an opinion from the other council members too, because otherwise you don't really know, how to interpret stuff on some things if there's, 2 different sides of a coin that you don't see.
Yeah.
So that's why I think the meetings are important.
Yeah, and this meeting, to my mind, maybe capital is, I think capital planning is a really, really big deal, but
It is.
it definitely comes off as being a lot less glamorous, people want to talk about operating budgets and staffing levels and street dances, and, that's stuff that people want to talk about, but, this is.
I'd rather talk
this
about
is
capital.
This is kind
Yeah.
this is kind of like the make or break. For me, this is the durable competitive advantage that we have over other
Right.
cities, is they're not doing this, and they're planning on issuing debt for loaders and squad cars and God knows what else. And which brings me to the next point, right? So if council members are gonna take a deep dive on their own into this stuff, you remember the basic points. We run out 20 years, actually 20 years plus, but present 20 years, and the point is, make sure you have cash. Make sure you actually have the money that you're supposed to have for the things that you've said we need, right? So don't issue debt on stuff that you don't have to. Now, we're still planning to issue debt for a third of the wastewater treatment plant, and there's that philosophical, who should pay? You don't want the 20 years before paying the full cost, and then everybody that's there after that's built pays nothing toward it, right? The other reason you go out 20 years or even, if you get the Excel book, you see even out farther is, the idea is to see any problems coming long in advance. Most cities will give a 5-year plan, and, when I first discovered that when I started in this business, I thought, my first question to the city manager at the time was, well, what if you have a really big problem in year 6? Well, it was not a really good answer, at least not to my mind, a satisfactory answer. The idea, you see that stuff coming, if you can find it at, 14 or 24 years out, you can make minor adjustments along the way that aren't going to be super impactful on anyone's taxes, but we can have an opportunity to kind of tick away at that and keep an eye on it and see if we can do a little bit better. The other item is, the really basic thing that's easy to overlook is, if the capital plan is a listing of things we need. So if there's things we need that aren't on it, I should know about it. Get it on there. And if there are things that are on that list that are not needs, then we should take them off. But they shouldn't be ever just taken off temporarily, right? It's like you need it or you don't, and kind of a black and white kind of thing. So at least right now, or at least for preliminary, up on the screen here, we've got the list of things that will be queued up for 2024. Everything's got their assigned useful life. We don't just replace it just because it hit its useful life, but we're gonna make sure there's cash available there if that needs to happen. You'll see the plow truck is in there. Plow truck is in there actually only because when we queued it up for 2022, it has just kept inching out. And last I talked to Matt, his vendor is saying, don't expect to be taking delivery or paying for this until 2024. So we've started having some discussions about those other future ones. We've got other ones coming up not long after that we might need to start talking to council about authorizing us to go forward with contracts on that earlier, so that we're not waiting 2-3 years beyond what we thought was going to be a delivery date. So something to keep in mind. Grader is the other big item on there. That has, in my time here, that's been debated back and forth. Basically, that number that's there is a number that we understand would be good for purchasing a used one from another city. We've already talked to them. They've already confirmed with us that if we want it, it would be available. It's in good condition, so if council feels like that's still the route we want to go, there's a nice used one from a not too far away city.
I have a question about the police squad vehicles. Now, I know we talked about this in the last meeting with the Ford Explorer, Travis, and you had said that the motor had already been replaced in that, and didn't you say the steering had already been replaced, or?
No, that's the one that we didn't replace. I think there was a $2,400 estimate on the repair that we didn't repair.
Okay.
Yeah,
So like the vehicles that are actually, in theory, the vehicles listed there are the primary patrol use vehicles that get put into the secondary, so those 2 Durangos go secondary. In theory, that's where that 221, the vehicle that we didn't fix, would probably be replaced, and my assumption within a year we'll have another major repair for that other Explorer, which is gonna take over a year before we get these anyway.
Okay, well, I know a lot of the police cars, they idle a lot, correct? So they're not, I think you said it had 110,000 miles on it. Now, all your suspension parts, ball joints, everything, they do take a little bit more abuse, but it's not the abuse like the motor is. So I see that as the motor's already been replaced. That's what's gonna be the big wearing item on those, the motor and the transmission. So I don't think, if you've already replaced the motor in it, I don't think we should spend the money to buy another new vehicle when that's what's gonna actually go out on those. It's not gonna be suspension unless there's an accident, or you run a curb really hard, or, I'm just trying to look at it like a frugal homeowner would, especially for not a vehicle that would chase people or do heavy stops. I don't know if.
So the basic premise on how this is set up is that we have, five officer patrol vehicles on the list?
Yeah.
Right? And basically, we're only scheduling to replace the primary vehicles, right? So I have 5 on the list, they rotate. Every 5 years, they come back on, and the basic premise has been in the past is there are certain items that officers have that have to simply work. Just saying, sorry, my squad car didn't start isn't an option, right? Then it's up to him after the fact, right? He goes through 5 years, we get the new one, now we know this one is good, this is gonna start, and I'm not gonna put a bunch of maintenance money into it, or repair money, I should say, into it. then it's up to him to say, yes, this still has value for my police department, but I'm only keeping it so long as I don't have to drop another $5,000, right? And so that, there was a, you know, just because he might have, what are you up to, 9 or something vehicles in the fleet? You know, not all 9 are listed. Some of them are, you know, I would list them, actually, if you see in the Excel book, I would always list them as DNR, do not resuscitate or do not replace, right? Like, it's there, we're acknowledging it, but the intent isn't to put more money into it.
Okay, I guess I would just like to try and see more use out of those. I mean, if you look at even the county, they have Dodges that are 6 or 7 years old, and they put on way more miles than we do. So I mean, it's,
Yeah,
if
they're
we're
on a lease
scheduled.
program.
What's that?
They lease their vehicles, I think it was a 4-year lease program,
Okay,
so they get new vehicles every 4 years.
okay. It's just, I mean, I don't know, I've seen older vehicles
Is there
being
a-
used
why
by
do
other
they-
sheriff's offices.
Why do they go that route versus buying them?
Well, you can ask them, but they're looking at going back the other route.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah.
We do the same thing for the county park stuff too. We try and lease stuff and, because it's easier for a budget to be able to plan a lease than for surprise, repair bills. That's basically why they went to it at the county.
It also takes less planning, which takes a lot of work.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's kind of the, no, in my experience, cities that I've come across that do get into lease programs, it's more about, they didn't do the planning, right? And they don't want to or won't or whatever.
That's
I mean,
fair,
you
too.
know, but I think if you're doing the planning, but yeah, I mean, if council wants to see the useful life change from 5 years on patrol vehicles to 6 or 7 or something, that's fine. You know, my advice is, you know, we gotta make sure we're replacing them so they, when they are supposed to go from point A to point B fast, they do.
Right.
And after that, you know,
I mean, that's kind of what, that's probably our number one priority, I guess I would say, is making sure that
Yeah.
they're able to get there when they need to get there, right? I mean, that's one of the few things that I think we really have to make sure that we're, you know, that and fire and.
But have we ever
roads and-
have we ever tried to make them go longer, and have we ever had any issues that really limit calls? I mean, you can always say, oh, let's spend more money, let's give them the best of the best.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
But
yeah,
at some point, I mean, you gotta look at the budget and say, well, if we can save, you know, 20 grand a year on, you know, just by only purchasing every 6 years versus 5, I mean, that's, I don't know, I think it's a big thing. I just see the budget going up and up and up, and that's the easy thing for government to do, is just spend, 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 when realistically, a household wouldn't do that. I mean, I would take, if I had a 2019 Dodge Durango, I would take it 100 miles an hour. At this point, that's not even that old, you know? They do take some wear and tear, but the wear and tear items that are gonna break are gonna be the motor and transmission. It's not gonna be, you're not gonna lose a wheel. I mean, it's not. And like, we have the sheriffs, we have we have multiple vehicles, so I guess I don't understand. I see a huge rising budget with PD, no offense, Travis, but it's just like, it just can't, I can't let it go. When you have vehicles that are perfectly fine, that, I don't know, I rode in one of the Dodge Durangos and I didn't notice anything wrong with it. So, and I'm a mechanic, so it's, I don't know.
The plan isn't to get rid of the Durangos, that's not the plan.
All right, to bump them down from yeah, I get it, but still, I get that they're kicked down, but you still have to spend the money to buy something to replace it, you know, so I just see taxpayers spending all this money, and I don't think they're actually getting a practical difference from it, from my eyes, but I mean, I could be totally wrong, but
How many vehicles total are we replacing every 5 years?
I think it's
Well-
5.
Yeah, we have 5 patrol vehicles, and
Five?
then there's the 2, you know, John's truck and.
There's 3 of them on 10-year cycles.
Yeah. So the non-patrol police vehicles are at 10 years, but the active patrol ones are a 5-year cycle.
Okay. Six years sounds reasonable to me.
I would like to
mean,
try it, I mean, I
the-
don't.
The
I don't-
mileage seems low enough.
I hate to try and cut you on that, Travis, but
The
it's.
mileage is, I think it's 100 and 111 on those 2. So we just need to make sure that as long as council's okay with repairing all those old Fords, if they go bad, we'd have to make that
Yeah.
choice too.
I mean, I think it depends on what goes bad. Say if you replace that motor in that other Ford Explorer, right? If that motor happens to go.
We can't, if we make the decision not to replace them, we have to make the decision to repair them, no matter what goes bad. You know what I'm saying? We don't have the luxury of saying, well, we're not gonna replace it, and then we're just not gonna have it. You know what I'm saying? So that's the whole plan, is what we met with Mike in trying to have a fleet plan, is so we don't get into the predicament where we're on the we have to have this vehicle last one more year, so we're gonna pay whatever it takes to make it last, because we need that vehicle.
But we have 9 vehicles,
Yeah.
so why
But those are
can't,
not all patrol vehicles.
but they were all at one point, correct?
No.
So if my math is right, if we have 5 vehicles that we're replacing 5 times, or once every 5 years, and we go 6 years, we're gonna have $71,000 extra to put into repair on all 5 vehicles, because we're waiting a year? My math is right?
If anything
Proper
needs,
math, I mean, you're saving at least a fifth of that. Yeah, you'd be saving,
20%.
yeah. 20%, I would say that's a lot of extra maintenance, 25,000 on those 5 vehicles.
I mean, even worst case, a motor and transmission is 10 grand. You know, that's worst case. You know, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the police cars just sit, and the motor and transmission, radiator, AC, that type of stuff is what's gonna go out. The suspension and all that is, I mean, it can take a beating, but it's,
What kind of warranty do you get on these Durangos from a manufacturer? Because they're a police vehicle,
It's
it's
the same
none?
warranty. They give us the same warranty as your commercial vehicle.
How long are the
Well,
ve-
3 or 36 is what they've been giving us.
336? And can you buy 6?
Not the
6
same
years?
as for civilians. I know
Okay.
that back 5 years ago, we were able to buy one on a Ford once as a police package extended warranty. But I know they're a different package. At least it was back then. We haven't looked into that now.
there's,
Can Mike or Travis, can you look into the manufacturers and the ones that you're comfortable with putting your officers in and just reevaluating those warranties, maybe on these upcoming years? Maybe they've extended them to 5, 6 years.
or 100,000 miles, like I know there are manufacturers do a 100,000 mile warranty, and that on a cop car would be very beneficial for us. Even just 100,000, because you're gonna avoid a lot of stuff in the first 100,000 versus of, you know. I think it'd be interesting to see that. It's a good idea. I don't know, that's just something I see as potential inefficiency in spending, so I wanted to bring that one up first off.
Here, kind of in this same questioning, I guess, I had written down some notes here, and I don't know if this is, if we're gonna just, we'll probably have a lot of meetings, I think, is kind of the answer to that
Yeah.
question.
I've kinda
Prepare for a lot of
I've
these, I
sensed
guess.
as much.
Yeah, so I might as well bring it up now, as long as we're kind of talking about it. So when I'm looking at this, I was gonna say, you know, why don't we, if we, and I think I need some clarification on kind of how it actually works, because you and I talked about it a little bit, just briefly in passing the other day, but, you know, let's say if we take a year like this year and we say, we're not gonna spend any of these amounts here. So, let's say we just push everything on this list back 1 year, and we push everything else on the list back 1 year. So we basically just buy ourselves a year on everything. How does that, and I was gonna say, continue to go ahead and buy the police vehicles, because I think, like I said, I think that's one of the main things. But, I mean, I could be talked into your guys' line of thinking too on that. I mean, but I think we gotta be really careful with that decision-making if we're gonna do it. I
agree.
You know what I mean? So, but let's say if we were to do something like that and say, okay, we're just gonna, and I know some of these things, they get transferred over from other accounts, so they're not all coming out of the general fund or anything, of course, so it doesn't all really go to the bottom line. But if you do buy yourself a year on all of these things, and you say, we're just gonna have a freeze on Fund 920, we're not gonna buy any new equipment, we're just gonna stick with what we have for 1 more year, how do you take that savings and distribute it? Because you can't take it all, of course, in 1 year, and otherwise the next year you're gonna have this huge hit, right? So, or am I wrong about that? I mean, how would you, if you were to do something like that, what would you do to see those savings or realize those savings?
Yeah, so the first thing is you end up with a pot of money now that is still there, right? We've been putting money in along the way, so that there's cash there available. And if we say, all right, now, all of 2024 is moving to 2025, 25 to 26, you know, the end analysis is still, what is available is still the same, right? I mean, in the end, we go all the way down to the bottom of the spreadsheet and we say, are we in the black? When it comes time to purchase all of our years in the future, are we in the black? You have de facto some amount of money available, but you are also potentially taking some amount of risk. And it's, I mean, everybody's probably gonna assess that differently. And yeah, you could use a chunk of money now, or spread it out, or, I mean, because in the end, if you save that money, you either say, all right, I'm gonna claim this now, right? Let's just say that gave us, we're just picking a round number. Let's just say that. saves us-
769,000.
Let's just say, all right,
Well,
169,000.
that's not quite right, but that's
Okay.
some other variables in there, but that's the
Yeah,
number I
so
came up
that's
with, so.
169,000. I mean, you basically are gonna say, well, all right, I have, the primary funding on this is levy, right? So that's not the only source of levy or funding, but that's the primary. So you can say, all right, I'm gonna use this 169 right now, or you are de facto spreading it out. And the most easy way to understand is the next point future, where you have a low point in cash. You've now, if you didn't take it all now, you've just de facto spread that evenly across those years. Is-
And we could decide how many, I mean, so I mean, you, potentially, you could take it all now, but that's gonna.
Yeah, you're just, I mean, to my mind, you introduce risk, but everybody is going to weigh that differently and have different risk assessment and tolerances. And it's gonna have to be, what is the council comfortable with? And what kind of conversations are you comfortable having with residents?
And I think I was gonna make the point too, I mean, that you had kind of sent us that breakdown, and I know we're running out of time here, so I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of bring it to that point here real quick, but, so, you know, the question that we had asked last time of what do we need to cut in order to, basically keep the actual dollar amount that someone is paying the same or less, right? So, and that number was 347,000, I think, was what you came up with, right?
Yeah,
So-
let's skip it,
Okay.
because we're down to the last minutes here anyway, but, come on. Catch up. There we go.
You were talking about paying the same tax amount as they did last year, not.
I'm talking actual cash, actual dollars that you would have to pay, yeah, not the rate or any of those things. We're talking actual dollars that we're wanting to, right,
So-
yep.
So, we can't set a levy in such a way that it works perfectly even for everybody, right? Because, you know, Luke's house might go up, you know, at a market rate at 7%, George's might go 7.2, but Jimmy's only goes 6.8, and, you know, so there's always gonna be some variance. But we would talk to the county, my instincts on how to figure this out, Alicia agreed. Basically, the average unimproved residential parcel, went up, I shouldn't say unimproved parcel, unimproved residence, right? So there's a house, right? Went up just the market rate, 8.83 year over year. So that's what we're looking at now. So simple is, if you want an ordinary house that hasn't had improvement, right? So if people are adding second stories or finishing basements or whatever, that's now kind of a different deal. But if you just say ordinary people, their home went up 8.83%, that means you need the tax rate to go down 8.83%. So this, it's not the most beautiful presentation. I kind of just ran out of time. I've got a fair amount on my plate right now. But in the end, you basically, the levy from what we saw at the last meeting needs to come down about 350 grand. And then, you know, the ordinary resident that has not otherwise significantly improved their parcel and is just floating up with the market, so to speak, would see mathematically, you know, materially the same. We would never be able to make it be to the penny by any stretch, but could keep it materially the same.
Okay. So that was kind of the answer to that question that we had asked last time. And then, you know, so I think, and I know that Luke and I had this conversation, but I was telling him, I mean, everything that you guys come to us with, from city staff perspective, I think is a legitimate ask, right? Like, I don't think that they come to us with stuff that's just extra. I mean, I think it's stuff that they could really use to make the job, you know, better or easier, or, you know, I mean, there's reasons that they're asking for this stuff. I don't think they're just frivolously coming and asking for just stuff that they don't need. So But I think that we also have to ask ourselves that our residents they live with that every day where they've got to say, well, I would love to have that, it would make this better, but, you know, can I live without it? And I think that's something that we've really got to be thinking about, and I think that we can be creative on how we look at this. I mean, there's no rules on the questions that we get to ask, and I think Mike is, even if you're not a fan of some of the things that we want to maybe do on certain scenarios, you're always honest in how you answer, and that's one thing I really appreciate about you.
And
So,
I've said this before, and I'll say it again, all I ever ask is in the budget process, I get to say my piece and try to make sure you guys are well-informed. And whether I think you've made great decisions or not, once council makes a decision, that is it, and I will get on board, that is how it works. So, as long as I get to say my piece, I'm happy, that's fine.
So I have a question for you, because we're definitely coming to a recession point and property values are going to go down. So how does the city react to that as far as budgeting when, say, the property values go down 7%? Well, now we are gonna get less tax revenue. So that is, I mean, how do you hedge your bets against that other than just not changing the double digits like you have talked about a bunch?
Yeah, the big part of this is, going back to those core 3 goals, right? One of them being, we gotta contribute to fund balance, right? This is the rainy day fund, right? This is why we modified, previously when I got here, the fund balance policy was simply 50%, and if you're ever over, you gotta reduce taxes, and if you're ever under, you gotta get back to it as fast as possible, but that's it. So now it's a floating, right? We'd like to stay above 30, but we're willing to go as high as 70 so that because someday it will happen, there will be another great recession someday. I'm not saying that's what's coming now, but
Right.
someday you're going to have a recession that doesn't last three quarters. It lasts 12. It's big, and it impacts 3 budget cycles. Well, that's when you'd really like to have that 70% fund balance, because that's the moment when business owners and taxpayers really need relief, and that is one of your best tools to be able to provide that with certainty.
So planning for a recession now right now, things are okay for most families. I know people are starting to feel the effects, but if we were to, I hate to even say it, but if we tax them as we normally would and we get more money, we can hold on to that as an insurance policy against what's inevitably coming at some point, the recession. So like you said, we can make a practical difference when it matters
Yeah.
more so. So it's,
And that's the one lament now, here on this budget is this budget doesn't currently call out a designated contribution to fund balance. Now, over the last, 2-3 budget cycles, we've done pretty well. I think we went from about 36 to 43 something percent. I mean, so we're making steady improvement. I would say that if we ever did add 20% in a single year, we probably screwed up. That would probably not be appropriate.
Right.
That's the same deal that I always kind of talk about, like no double-digit increases, no double-digit decreases. Let's be consistent and plan well enough that we don't go all over the place. But yeah,
However, the one thing I will add to that is we did have that fund balance depleted pretty substantially, so it was building back up. But that should be looked at, the bank of money that we use to carry us through those tough, difficult years. If it's down below even 50%, it doesn't do us as much good as if it was higher to
right,
have for those times.
right.
and I think when I'm talking about some of these things, I mean, and it's not something I haven't mentioned, but I mean, we're talking 769,000 if we were to just
Push it
push
back,
everything back,
right.
right? But I think when we look at some of these ways that we could potentially, and I've got a bunch of other similar type ideas that are pretty drastic differences, right? But when you look at that, I think we should take some of that savings that we've realized from, if we decide to make some of those big changes, and put some of that aside for the fund balance too.
Or all of it,
So that
yeah.
we are still saving, we're able to relieve it now, we're saving for a rainy day at the same time. You know what I
Yep.
mean? I think that those two goals need to go hand in hand, because you are right, that, I mean, if we do get in a situation, you wanna have that to fall back on, and you don't wanna have to raise taxes in a tough time. So I think we can be, in a lot of ways, really aggressive, and we can make some really big differences, and contribute to the fund balance and lower taxes at the same time would be the goal, I think.
So 70% is a magic number for that balance?
it's not a magic number. It just, when I proposed that fund balance policy, to my mind, it feels like if you are, I think at the time, the way I explained it was this, is that if you are going above 70%, that means you fully expect that at some point in the future, you're gonna have at least 3 budget cycles that are severe downturn, right? Where you might reasonably draw 15 to 20% per year. I would say is that if you get to a point where you actually need to do that for a 4th year, you may very well have some other much, much bigger problems.
Okay.
Like, you know, we're talking like, then we might be talking about like some kind of a real economic collapse where we might start wondering whether people are going to work and who's sitting on the roof with a shotgun. Like, so I don't know that beyond 70 is,
What did the ordinance used to be? It's not an active ordinance anymore, but it was it, we had to be at 50%
it
or?
was, so it's a non-ordinance, it's policy,
Yeah,
right?
okay,
And, you know, this matters with the rating agencies and things like this, but
Mm-hmm.
it was 50%. And if you were ever below it, you had to have a plan to get back to that as soon as possible. And if you were ever over even 1%, that had to be used to reduce taxes. Now, it didn't exactly say how or when you could do that, because it's always kind of a lagging thing. So, you know, by the time I know 2022, let's say in 2022, I ended at 51% under the old policy. By the time I would know that, well, I'm already well into 23, so.
But so historically,
you know,
50% has, it
Yeah.
can be anywhere between 30 and 7, but by state statute, right? Or is that?
No,
not-
no, that's-
just our own,
That's our own thing.
Okay,
And it's,
all right.
yeah, and in the end, your end game for why you're picking a fund balance policy is what makes sense for your community, but also is keeping a mind on when you do need to issue debt, whether you intend to or not, but if you do need to issue debt, rating agencies do care. And if your bond rating starts to tick down because you've allowed fund balance to go to 20, down to 12, down to 8, you're going to pay demonstrably more interest on any debt that you do issue. So
so
that's the
historically,
constant thing.
50 is the answer to that question.
That's
so, but-
that's a great number, even higher would be beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, and in the, yeah, I mean, you know, it's a rainy day fund, but you also say, it's insurance, right? It's certainty in a future tax rate it's kind of what you're buying.
Otherwise, you're tripling a tax rate the following year because you don't have the funds.
Yeah, yep.
All right, well, let's, anything else you want to add real quick to kind of finish a point off, or you
No, if.
want to plan on meeting
Yeah, so, oh, that's a great point.
15th?
Yes, we should formally declare that we're going to have another work session at the end of August here.
Okay, so we'll have, do I need a motion for that then, or?
I'll make a motion that we have, what's it, August 18th
Yep, that would
Yep.
be ideal, yep.
or
15th,
15th?
yeah.
Sorry, yep.
Okay. And then I think, to your point about November and October, I mean, we could add those in September even if we feel like
Yeah, we
we
just-
need them,
Right.
or?
Yeah, we just need to be forthright about that, because we want to make sure that these are things that are published and noticed and people know. So like these 2 meetings and the third optional one, we already approved that back in, April, and put that stuff in the paper. So that's why this one, we can just say we're doing it, but we need to give the public an opportunity to understand that this is what we're talking about.
Okay. So I mean, at our next meeting, we could decide that we'd like to get the ball rolling to have a meeting in November, or?
Right, it wouldn't be anything more than a standard 10-day, put it in the paper thing.
Right,
Okay.
that's correct.
All right, so yeah, we could probably just kind of address that as needed, and, yeah. So I've got a motion then for an additional budget meeting on the 15th of August to immediately follow the council meeting, yeah.
I'll second that.
And that's the motion from Councilman Merrill and a second from Councilman Heeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. And then if we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I've got a motion to adjourn from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Heeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. We are adjourned.